Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at something presented in our source as, well, a really glorious triumph for peace.
Yeah, in a region that's seen just far too much conflict.
Exactly. So, for this deep dive, our mission is basically to explore the details, the human side of things, and, the different viewpoints around this historic peace agreement.
That's the one, between the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, and Rwanda.
And what's unique here, right, is our source material. It's all coming from a YouTube video transcript.
Which gives us this interesting mix, doesn't it? Kind of high-level White House reporting, but also trying to capture that on-the-ground feeling.
Yeah, the dual perspective. And the source immediately flags how it was presented, direct reporting from the White House. That's pretty unusual framing.
It is. And a key figure in getting that ground perspective, according to the source, is a reporter named Hariana.
Right, an African reporter accredited at the White House. The source describes her as having real knowledge and real heart.
Which sort of sets the stage for her credibility in the narrative.
And she apparently went to the DRC recently to see things firsthand.
Yeah, that's what the source details. She traveled there, talked to people, on the street.
And what did she find? What was the feeling there, according to her report in the source?
Well, she reported that the youth, the ordinary people, they know your name, referring to President Trump in the source's context.
Okay.
And that they see what's supposedly being done, and they feel, and this is a direct quote from the source referencing her report, hope now for a better day in Congo.
Wow. That's quite a powerful statement to include. Hope, directly linked to that specific name.
It is, and there's also this slightly unusual bit in the source, an exchange where Hariana is called beautiful.
Oh, how does the source frame that?
Well, it's presented almost as emphasizing her access, maybe, the trust she built. It leans into this idea of her direct, impactful reporting style, making that comment part of the scene, if you will. It's an interesting narrative choice in the source.
Okay. So moving on from the street view, she also interviewed President Tshisekedi of the DRC.
Yes, Felix Tshisekedi. And his perspective, again, as filtered through Hariana in the source material, is, well, it's quite pointed.
How so?
He apparently offered a really strong critique of past U.S. administrations.
Oh, really?
Yeah, saying they'd overlooked this conflict, hadn't taken action. The source even mentions him citing the Biden administration specifically.
Okay, so criticism of the past.
Yeah.
But what about the present, in his view?
Well, that's where the contrast comes in, according to the source. He expressed profound gratitude for the current administration's efforts.
Profound gratitude.
Conveying that, quote, the entire Congo people finally see hope because of these actions. It really paints a picture of, frustration shifting to optimism based on this reported diplomacy.
And wasn't there something else, something quite bold mentioned in the source regarding Tshisekedi and Trump?
Yes. That was definitely striking. The source reveals that Tshisekedi was considering nominating President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize.
A Nobel nomination?
Oh!
For the work in Congo and global peace efforts, the source said.
Exactly. And he also apparently expressed a strong desire to meet him. Including that detail really, it really amplifies the source's narrative about the perceived significance of these actions.
It certainly makes a statement within the source's account. Okay, let's just take a step back for a second and unpack the context here. The conflict itself.
Right, because you can't really grasp the agreement without understanding what came before.
The source mentions this conflict in the Great Lakes region, going on for 30 years.
Yeah.
Maybe even longer.
Yeah, decades.
Yeah.
And the human toll, it's just horrific, as laid out in the source. It talks about countless people displaced and lives lost, thousands and thousands.
But the source gives an even starker figure, doesn't it?
It does. It specifies at least 6 million people were killed during that period of time.
6 million.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to comprehend that number.
And to drive that point home, the source uses a very stark comparison.
Which was?
It calls it the biggest war on the planet since World War II.
Wow, okay. Biggest war since World War II. That really puts this supposed peace agreement into perspective.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the agreement itself. The core event in this source, the signing between the DRC and Rwanda.
A historic peace agreement, as the source labels it.
Yes. Now, the source doesn't really dive deep into the specific clauses or mechanisms of the agreement itself.
Okay.
But it heavily emphasizes the outcome, the stated goal. The violence and destruction comes to an end.
Right. And the whole region starting a New chapter of hope and opportunity, harmony, prosperity, and peace. Quite aspirational language.
Very. And the source notes that gratitude was extended to the representatives from both countries who actually signed it. It marks that moment, that formal step.
A formal step towards, well, hopefully reconciliation and stability after all that time.
Yeah.
At least that's the narrative presented.
Precisely. And it's interesting how the source then broadens the credit, mentioning others involved.
Like who?
Secretary of State Marco Rubio gets acknowledged for outstanding leadership. And also Senior Advisor for African Affairs, Masad Boulos. He's mentioned for extensive work in Africa, apparently spending a lot of time there, being very comfortable, even in difficult situations, as the source puts it.
So individuals credited. What about, like, organizations or other countries?
Yeah, the source mentions the African Union, specifically President Juan Lourenço of Angola, noted as the AU leader, and also Qatar and Togo are credited for working closely with the United States on this. So it paints this picture of a collaborative effort, at least in the source's telling.
A whole network involved. And the source didn't just stop at the DRC and Rwanda, did it? It mentioned other places.
No, it definitely broadened out. It included claims of peace achieved elsewhere, attributing it to similar diplomatic strategies.
Like where? I remember reading that part.
India and Pakistan were mentioned, Israel and Iran, surprisingly,
Okay.
and also preventing a conflict between Serbia and Kosovo that one was specifically linked in the source to using trade incentives.
Right. So the source presents a very active and successful diplomatic picture overall.
That's certainly the narrative thread, yes.
And looking ahead, the source mentioned a follow-up meeting.
It did. An official meeting planned for July involving the presidents of Rwanda and Congo, possibly the AU leader too.
And Hariana, the reporter, is expected to cover that as well.
That's what the source indicated, yeah. Bringing the story full circle, potentially.
So, okay, we've covered the reporter's view, the president's view, the horrific scale of the conflict, the agreement itself, and the wider diplomatic picture presented in the source. What does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well, this deep dive gave us a glimpse through one specific lens, that YouTube transcript, into some really high-stakes diplomacy.
Yeah, and the role of reporting from the ground, and just the sheer human cost of a conflict that spanned decades.
And how it's now supposedly moving towards some kind of resolution, according to this account. It presents a very particular story of how this peace came about.
So thinking about that scale, biggest war since World War II, 6 million dead and all the players involved, as laid out in our source. What does this specific account, this narrative we've unpacked, suggest about how international peacemaking works, or how it's sometimes presented?
That's a great question. And what might the actual lasting impact be on the millions affected, beyond the headlines and the signing ceremonies presented here?
Exactly. What are the deeper questions this new chapter, as the source calls it, really raises for the region's future, based on this telling of the story? Something to think about.